Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bad Ideas, the show where we look at misfires, mistakes, and miscalculations from all throughout history.
I'm Tony Southcott.
And I am Albert Berg, and my bad idea for this week is a little bite-sized one, Tony. I know I did one of these last week, but we're planning on getting into a bigger one in a couple weeks, so I'm saving up my book reading time. We're going to talk about kerbonkers, click-clacks, bolos, clacker balls.
I've heard of bolos, like the thing that people used to like swing above their head and trap like animals with.
I would assume that you could use those for this purpose. My initial reaction to all of these names is they sound vaguely dirty, but they were a children's toy in the 1970s, and it was just a piece of string, and on both ends of the string was an acrylic plastic sphere, and in the middle, a lot of times there would be a knot or a ring or something that you would hold on to, and it was a really simple idea. You had these balls connected together, and you would maneuver them in such a manner that the balls would clack together at the bottom, and then they would gain momentum and bounce off of each other, and then eventually get to where they were clacking together at the top and the bottom. So you had this sort of vicious, wildly flailing set of plastic balls going up and down opposite each other on these pieces of string.
See, like this is what we did before smartphones, where you just played with balls.
I wanted to make fun of these a little bit, but then I remembered that we had fidget spinners, like now. So we're still into simple toys that have some kind of physical components, and you can understand the draw of these toys, right? Like there's, again, like I said, there's some kind of physical component. First of all, there's a skill level required. Like you don't have to be a genius to use them, but you are going to have some level of accomplishment once you get these things going. I remember playing with them at some point in my childhood or something similar.
Yeah, I remember them as well. I don't remember exactly where. I don't think I ever owned them, but I'm pretty sure some of my friends did, or it was like in some shared toy box somewhere.
It was marketed as something that would improve hand-eye coordination, which is kind of like the BS that they put on building blocks these days, like about how it improves your spatio-relationship knowledge for children or something. Like, it's just some blocks, guys. Calm it down a little bit. But it's supposedly supposed to be helpful and beneficial to your children. And honestly, as a parent, all I can think about is the noise.
Yeah, it seems like most of the toys are just all giant noisemakers, and this sounds directly only to be making noise. Like, I was hanging out with my niece this weekend, and every toy she had some sort of audio component that was just grinding on the brain.
Right, so imagine, now honestly, your niece is very young, so this would take someone a little bit older to actually be able to get the hang of. But if you've got a 7-year-old and up in your house who's into these things, they're going to have to play outside, all right? People talk about how in the 70s people used to play outside. It was because of this, okay? Because morning, noon, and night, kids are walking around going clack, 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 and mom didn't want that in the house. She would have killed you. Literally, you would have been dead, and so she sent you out to ride your bike and, brave the weirdos outside.
Yeah, there was a lot of that for me. It was like, you're not allowed to come home before sunset.
There's very little information on where this toy got its start, and you can imagine it going back pretty far with an idea as simple as this. But by the height of its popularity, there were hundreds of companies producing some variation of this same toy for kids all over the world. They were so popular, they spread as far as Calcinello, Italy, which was a town with a population of just over 12,000 that held a competition for the best ball clacker. I read about this on the Consumer Safety Products website of the United States government. They included this little detail and also mentioned that the prize was some local delicacy dish that somebody cooked up for the best ball clacker in this little town in Italy.
I mean, to be fair, most of the dishes in Italy could probably win prizes over here.
The obvious problems of this toy are, first of all, as we mentioned, super loud, super annoying, and perhaps more dangerously, the fact that you're swinging heavy plastic balls around on the end of a string As you noted, Tony, and as the names of this toy suggests, there is an actual weapon that's exactly the same design called the Bolo. So you're already dealing with a certain level of danger, but in the 1970s, that would still fly. You could still get by with people doing stupid things to themselves based on the design of the toy. But what became a problem here was that the acrylic plastics that they used in these balls, it was the best they had at the time, and it worked really well when it worked. But the problem was occasionally you would get tiny flaws in the manufacture of these clear plastic balls. And when you had one of these flaws, the forces that were involved in the clacking of the balls up and down and back and forth, I mean, again, you can imagine if you get these things going, they're traveling, I don't know how fast, but real fast and hitting each other real hard to bounce back and go the other way many hundreds of times, throughout the course of a single play session. And if you had a defect in one of these things, the ball would explode.
Like, how bad of an explosion are we talking about? Just like plastic fragments, or is there something that caused them to like actually pop and like shard out?
It wasn't a chemical. No, we're not talking about like massive, people losing an arm or something. But it was an eye danger. There was an American Society for the Prevention of Blindness who found out about this particular defect, and they lobbied heavily for these things to be banned. Now, this toy, with its widespread popularity and its particular problems, came at an interesting time in American history because the government was becoming increasingly interested in ensuring the safety of children. The nanny state that you've heard so much about was really getting going at this time. In 1969, Congress had passed the Child Protection and Toy Safety Act, which expanded the Food and Drug Administration's purview to include ensuring the safety of children's toys. And a little bit later in 1973, the Consumer Protection Bureau would be created to handle product safety in America. But for a brief time, toy safety was the FDA's job. So in 1971, the FDA took up the issue of clacker balls, and they started studying the potential dangers that these toys posed. And they started in like February, and by April, they already had a set of safety regulations that would ban clacker balls unless the manufacturers could prove that they were safe through regular and extensive testing of the product. And that distinction, I think, is very important. This toy shows up on a lot of quote-unquote banned toys lists, and according to the law in 1971 at least, the government did not say you could not make clacker balls. They did not say you could not buy clacker balls. All they said was, if you're going to do this, you need to test like 1 out of every 50 or so and make sure that it's not going to crack, to make sure that you're getting good safety standards so that kids will be safe.
I mean, it just makes sense. It's just a small bit of quality control on something that kids are going to be handling.
And you would think that that wouldn't have had that big of an impact, but apparently a lot of companies were unwilling to do this testing. And so the FDA had to go after some folks. They were willing to put teeth to their newfound powers, and in 1974 in Mequon, Wisconsin, the Federal Marshal Service seized a large shipment of clacker balls and I'm sorry. No, I was going to... As a result of this law, in 1974, in Mequon, Wisconsin, the Federal Marshal Service seized a large... As a result of this law, in 1974, in Mequon, Wisconsin, the Federal Marshal Service seized a large shipment of clacker balls, and the newly formed Consumer Protection Bureau filed one of the most amusingly named lawsuits of all time. And this lawsuit, Tony, this is like half the reason I decided to do this episode of Bad Ideas. It makes me so happy. In the effort and the mission to save the children from having shards of acrylic plastic go into their eye from exploding clacker balls, the federal government filed this case entitled United States v. Article consisting of 50,000 cardboard boxes more or less, each containing 1 pair of clacker balls.
I hope that someone has had to quote that in court as giving precedent for a case like this.
I read about this, and it was included in some lists as one of the most amusingly named court cases of all time, but apparently there is legal precedent for bringing a lawsuit against an object instead of a person. And they won the case, Tony. The toy manufacturer, from what I read, mounted a really pathetic defense of this thing. They misquoted the Constitution in their defense of like, you guys have undue use of power or something. I forget exactly how they phrased it, but they misquoted the article of the Constitution that they wanted to use to defend themselves, and the judge was just like, yeah, they got that the law says you can't do it. They also said apparently they had read the part that said if you're testing them, you're cool, and thought that it meant you're cool, even though they weren't testing them. Not a bunch of really bright guys. And not just in this case, but throughout the sort of reign of terror against the Clacker balls, the government seized over 300,000 of these Clacker ball toys. And they were not destroyed. This is the other very interesting part of the story to me, Tony. They took them away, and rather than just get rid of them, and there was even talk at the time of throwing them into the harbor somewhere, just like sinking them. They stored them at the port of Miami, and some enterprising businessman bought them off of the government to sell in South America, where the regulations were less strict. And I lost the trail of the story at that point. I don't know what happened to the 300,000 Clacker balls that originally rested in the port of Miami. I was not able to find confirmation that they did make their way to South America. But for a time in North America, and particularly America, the Clacker ball phenomenon faded away.
Like most of the fads that we have, except this one was a little bit more deadly. I just love the idea of like kids using bolos to make noise.
I do want to say, and sort of circling back around to the idea that there was a complete ban, you can still buy these today, or some variation of these. They have gotten much better plastics. They do not still explode. We're not still using clear acrylic plastic. We've got better stuff now. And the toy is back on the market. I would imagine not competing with the fidget spinner, and certainly not anywhere near what its heyday was back in the day when they had them.
See, I would have thought that like rubber balls would be more fun because they would bounce faster. Like, they just don't make as much noise.
Haven't you ever tried to bounce a marble, Tony? They bounce super high. Like, the more rigid a substance is, the more bounce it has. You just have to find something that's super rigid and also won't break.
I have not tried to bounce a marble.
You'd get about a 50% chance of breaking the marble, but if it didn't break, it would bounce higher than any rubber ball would. Because it's very, very hard, when you deform it even a little bit, it's going to push back with almost exactly equal force. That's why Newton's cradles balls were made with steel and not rubber. If you made a Newton's cradle with rubber, it wouldn't do anything. But the transfer of energy is almost instantaneous when you have a harder substance. A little physics for you guys in the Bad Ideas episode. That's all I've got about Clacker balls, though, Tony. I hope that people enjoyed hearing a little bit about the history of this. This is not the worst idea. I gotta say, like, it was a cool toy idea. It just had some flaws in the manufacturing process. Mostly I picked it for the amusing court information and the name of the... I mean, they're called kerbonkers, Tony. Like, every single... There's a long list of names for these things, and every single one of them... It's either it sounds like some kind of dirty thing, and you could roll the dice on which dirty thing it is, but it does sound like weird, and I wonder if that is also part of the reason they're not quite as popular anymore.
It could be.
Just people don't want to play with balls.
If you guys ever played with these toys, we'd love to hear about it in the comments section, so go ahead and hit that up on YouTube. If you're listening,
tweet at us at Human Echoes.
Yeah, at Human Echoes is a great way of getting a hold of us, especially if you're listening to this on the audio thing. What's up, all you Overcast listeners? If you did enjoy this, please check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/humanechoes. For $2, $5, $10, or a little bit more per month, you can get some awesome early content. You can get a lot of videos. You can get pins, postcards, all sorts of other cool stuff for our members.
We'll see you guys next week. Take care.
Bye.